Welcome to the Football Garbage Time NFL podcast. My name is Wong, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Football Garbage Time. And with me is the OG co-host. It's Ryan Whitfield. Hey, Ryan, how you doing?
Well, better than the last couple of weeks. I'm actually here on a laptop instead of on my phone, so feeling good.
Look at that. We are making small steps, man. It's like baby steps. We're going to get there eventually. We're going to get there, and we're already making progress. And I'll say this: I know no one wants to hear about our pre-show gab, but you got some great Legos behind you there that are blurred out right now. It's fantastic. If anybody could see it, you would be amazed. But sorry, you can't. It's private.
Well, I got my social security number written on that whiteboard back there. So
yeah, if I had mine written up behind me, it'd be worthless. Okay, I'm not getting social security. Forget about that. Anyway, we got plenty to talk about today because we're going to do our final thoughts on Super Bowl 59. We're talking about some off-season issues for both the Chiefs and the Eagles. Then we're going to turn to the NFL Combine, which is coming up just only about a week and a half away. And we're going to talk about some quarterbacks that we get our eyes on. So let's get this one rolling. All right, let's get started with the Super Bowl 59. Now, I've been all over the place talking about my thoughts on what happened there. And so I think everybody doesn't need to hear it from me again. But Ryan, give us your final thoughts on Super Bowl 59, your takeaway here.
Yeah, so I think, the big takeaways here are one, we talked about this in the pre-show or the pre-Super Bowl show.
Right.
That Eagles defensive line, similar to what the Giants did in 2007, 2011, showed that if you can drop 7 in coverage and you get to the quarterback with 4, did I expect the Eagles to not call a single blitz the entire game? Nope. Did I expect it to look that insane? No, but it did. The Chiefs' probably biggest hole is their offensive line. And the Eagles' biggest strength is probably their defensive line and the waves that they can come at you with because they got guys off the bench who can get after the quarterback. So, and I think really refreshing overall for the league. I said this going into into the Super Bowl that this is going to tell us if it really is just about coach and quarterback combo, or if a well-rounded team with maybe a less than stellar quarterback or a less than elite quarterback. Like Jalen Hurts, can win on the biggest stage. We've seen Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo fail. And I'm trying to think. No, I think that's really in the last couple of years. But
feels like the Chiefs keep winning.
Well, yeah, it's been the same teams the last couple of years. But Jared Goff back in 2018 against the Patriots, it was Brady, it was Stafford, it was Mahomes. We've just seen the elite guys continue to win, and we finally saw that. So I think that's refreshing for the league because it tells you still can build a team. Scott would here, I'd say that gives you hope for the Lions, although I'd probably still take Jalen Hurts over Jared Goff. It's close, but I'd probably lean Hurts next in that scenario. It's not the early 2000s. You can't win with Trent Dilfer, right? But I think you can still win with a less than top 3 quarterback now, and we've seen that as long as your roster's built well enough. I also think it's interesting just from a salary cap or ownership commitment level, just to note that the Eagles spend, and throughout the salary cap stuff, this is something that we saw over the last 20 years here in New England, is that, if you have an elite quarterback, you can get away with a little less spending, but there is a threshold. And I believe the Chiefs the last 2 or 3 years have been in the bottom third in cash spending in the league. Now, I think that's similar to what the Patriots had to deal with. I would bet Spagnuolo is one of the highest paid coordinators in football, and I bet Andy Reid is one of the highest head coaches salary in football. So that does go into the overall spending from the Hunt family. But again, the Patriots have been going on 10 years now. One of the third, I think they're bottom 5 in cash spending. And I mean, you can't win like that, even if you have a great quarterback. And that's what Brady was frustrated about 2019, which may eventually led him to leave. So hopefully that this is a wake up call for the Chiefs, for them to look and see that, hey, we got to put talent. We can't put it all on Mahomes. We got to put talent around him, because even an elite guy, can't, even the best quarterback in football can't win in that scenario. It just doesn't happen. You need talent around him. So
totally agree. And actually that kind of leads into the kind of our talk about what they should do in the offseason, both the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Now on the Chiefs side, I mean, you kind of nailed it here. I mean, they got to start spending some money somewhere, and their entire wide receiver room is basically on the move outside of Xavier Worthy. You got DeAndre Hopkins, Justin Watson, Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, all of them free agents at the end of this year. Kareem Hunt, also a free agent at the end of this year. Obviously, they had some significant issues along the offensive line. That is a problem. But what do you think? I mean, what do you think the Chiefs should be doing this offseason? Should they be retaining any of these guys, or should they be going and finding something else? I mean, because they just got a laundry list of guys who are leaving. And in addition to Kareem Hunt, also Samaje Perine also going to be gone. So they're really down to just Pacheco, who has been pretty ineffective since coming back from injury. So what are your thoughts here in terms of the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, so I'm not as intimately familiar with their pick by pick performance as I would say the Patriots over the last 10 years.
Right.
But I mean, high level, for every Rashee Rice you can point to, and potentially Xavier Worthy, I can point to a Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Sky Moore, right? And so I think this is part of what's going on in Kansas City, is that their drafting hasn't been all hits. So they've had their fair share of misses. And I think Rashee Rice is a nice player. I think Xavier Worthy is a nice player. Have they actually adequately replaced Tyreek Hill since he left? The answer is no. Travis Kelce, I think we all knew he was in the back nine, and that really got exposed in this game. I think another part from like a philosophy standpoint that I think is concerning for the Chiefs is, Pacheco is a decent pass blocker, but they didn't have a fullback that could say, and they didn't have a true bell cow back who could say and help pass protect. And what we saw with Travis Kelce is, we all know we can't block anyways, but I mean, that got extra exposed in this game. That clip that's gone viral of the airmail on Josh Sweat as he goes right around the corner and gets a sack. Not having any, because most of the backups, Noah Gray, Christian Watson, or not Christian Watson, what's the Watson they had there? Whatever. All their tight ends are basically less talented versions of Kelce. And so it's like you couldn't even keep in a sixth, you couldn't actually put a real, true pass blocking tight end out there to help. So they got a bunch of holes. I think philosophy wise, they got to kind of shift a little bit. You got to be able to win in a multitude of ways in the NFL at a high level. Like the whole idea that defense wins championships, I don't believe is true. It's balance wins championships. And I don't think that they're a diversified balance attack anymore. I think they win one way offensively, and they don't have the weapons anymore to support that. So they got to draft better is number one. But they got to upgrade that receiving room big time. And again, it just comes, they got to invest cash here. Trey Smith is a free agent. Joe Tooney needs to be moved back to guard, which means they still don't really have a true tackle, because that was the reason they moved them out of tackles, because both their tackles were not good. Their rookie tackle, whose name I'm forgetting, basically got benched midway through the year and was not good. And they got to replace Travis Kelce, even if he does come back, which I kind of feel like he's going to walk away. But even if he does, I mean, again, this is the 35-year-old season. I mean, you can't rely on him to be Travis Kelce 4 years ago. So you've never replaced Tyreek. Now you got to replace Travis. They got to rebuild. Now that defensive side is pretty set. Like, I don't think you have to do a ton. I'm not intimately aware of what all the free agents are on the defensive side, but I think you can.
Justin Reed, I think maybe you have to really think about it.
So I think you can supplement through the draft and bring that back. The problem is this is not a good wide receiving group coming into the NFL. You can't address this. They have to open up the playbook. And they got a bunch of guys who are really good route runners that can move around, Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. So I actually think they make a lot of sense as somebody to go target DK Metcalf. DK is
that would be a big upgrade for them. Yeah,
he's a bit of a one-trick pony, but what he does, they don't really have a guy that can do. So that they go, that's where I would attack if I was them. Bring him in to that group, and then maybe they get lucky, and maybe Ashton Genty falls to them in the first round, and now all of a sudden they spend a second to get DK. They bring in Ashton Genty, and then they just got to fix their offensive line. And now I think the Chiefs are right back in it next year.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think that's some good thoughts there on the Chiefs. I think that when you go back and look at it, they'll be doing a lot of film study to figure out where they fell a little short and in the Super Bowl. Let's turn to the other side and talk about the Eagles, because they have a very interesting problem. In terms of skill players, most of the skill players will be there. They were not going to be going anywhere. But in terms of defense, Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, Zach Bond, Milton Williams, that's like most of that front four. And quite frankly, Zach Bond was getting his hits in along with the front four, only because of the fact that, they had a situation where they would drop Nolan Smith into coverage and then they'd rush him instead. So, quite frankly, that front four is Nolan Smith, Josh Sweat, Jalen Carter, and Milton Williams. So they're going to have to do some re-signing. Obviously, that was a big reason of why they won the Super Bowl. The offensive side, pretty much all set, except for Kenneth Gainwell, who is going to be a free agent. Well, what are your thoughts here on the Eagles? I mean, right now, it doesn't look like there's going to be much turnover outside of that.
Yeah. The Eagles, Howie Roseman's done a great job, and he doesn't whiff on defensive linemen. He basically went back and dominated the Super Bowl when when they won their Super Bowl 7 years ago. They had a great front seven, and outside of Brandon Graham, it's completely new guys. He did, and again, they have rotational pieces that come in and can rush the passer. So I'm just not super worried. I think their scouting department and the front office over there knows it's kind of like Pittsburgh with their receivers. I know Pittsburgh's kind of hit a dry spot the last couple of years, but for 20 years there, it was from Hines to Plaxico to Mike Wallace and to Antonio Brown. Like, I mean, the Steelers just were a receiver factory, and I think that's kind of the same here. Now, I have a big picture idea what they should do, and this is self-serving a little bit.
Okay.
And it's going to depend how the draft is shaking out. First of all, when you have Jordan Davis and you have Jalen Carter, like, you're fine. So the Eagles front seven is going to be fine.
Okay.
But if they really want to make a splash, if somehow Abdul Carter is slipping to say number 4,
right,
you have a disgruntled receiver who is not happy in Philly. I mean, the comments that have come out post Super Bowl, I thought the winning would make me happy and all this, like, and the fight in the game that AJ Brown had with that sideline, the reading the book,
that was weird.
Does not want to be there.
Right.
And Mike Vrabel, AJ Brown's been on the record. He wanted to be a Patriot. He cried when the Patriots didn't draft him and stuff. I think if somehow Abdul Carter slips to 4, that's a really easy fix for them. Move him to the Patriots. Patriots are receiver hungry. Take the 4th, take Abdul Carter, and let Josh Sweat walk because you just replaced him. And now you got 3 super young defensive linemen that you can be there for the next 7 years, 8 years for you. So I think they can creatively solve it. It's not a super deep defensive end draft. The other obvious trade target for them would be Myles Garrett if they want to really just go for broke right now. Because and that's not really a long term as much as, like, I like the idea of, again, the 2 Georgia boys and Abdul Carter, wreaking havoc for 8 years. You're probably getting 3, maybe 4 great years out of Myles Garrett. But if you just I don't know that it's probably draft capital you're flipping in that, but I think that. I mean,
they've got to be in win now mode though, because they obviously they just won and they're going to turn around mostly all their offensive starters. So it's almost like if they don't, all they need to do is not screw it up. I feel like, you know what I mean? They just got to not screw it up.
2 Super Bowl wins and 3 Super Bowl appearances in 7 years. I know we're all talking about the Chiefs dynasty, and I know that by and large, most of those pieces, I mean, that was Alshon Jeffries and Nelson Aguilar running by each other, high-fiving when they beat the Patriots back in 2017. So, like, I know, and it was Nick Foles, and outside of Brandon Graham, it's like basically a completely different roster. I don't know how many people are still there, but when you look at the front office, the Howie Roseman and then Jeff Lurie is the owner. Like, when you look at that combination, so I think they're in win now, but I think they've also proven already they can be sustainable because they haven't really had a down year in that stretch. They whiffed on Carson Wentz as a quarterback, won it with Nick Foles, and then just came right back with Jalen Hurts. Like, they have built a sustainable model, and I mean, it starts with, again, don't let the salary cap fool you. It's all about the actual true cash spending in the NFL, and the Eagles and Lurie have proven that they're willing to do it. So I think they'll solve it one way or the other.
When the Jalen Hurts, it's funny because I was one of those guys who, when they drafted Jalen Hurts, I was like, what are they doing? Because they just paid Carson Wentz, but turned out to be the smartest move they ever made. Because he really makes that engine run, and he's been a real baller out there. And they don't really need AJ Brown, although I have to say they're going to have to get somebody who's a big playmaker. I don't think Devontae Smith is that guy. He's not going to be like a wide receiver 1. He's great where he is right now. But if they do get rid of AJ Brown, they're going to have to flip somebody else into that position. that will be a threat. Maybe
Win now
DK.
mode.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
I think because they're in win now mode, that they can go after one of the older guys who's going to be available. Like I know he's coming off a really big knee injury, but I mean, if you're them, do you take a 2-year shot on Chris Godwin?
sure.
Coming
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
Like
That
again,
would work.
they don't, like I look at like the way I've been evaluating receivers, like as a Patriot fan, is like, we need T Higgins because you need somebody young and controlled and stuff. Like I don't want what are the Patriots going to do with Chris Godwin? By the time the
Yeah.
Patriots are actually relevant, well, he'll be done. But I mean, the Eagles, yeah, go patch him in for 2 years next to Cooper Kupp's on the market. Again, you don't need a guy who's going to be relevant in 2030. You need a guy who can produce in 2025 and 2026 if you're the
Right.
Eagles. So I think again, they're so loaded. They have a ton of options. I would move him. I would remove AJ Brown from the locker room because for whatever reason he is not happy there. And that
Right.
again,
It's not working.
Even the title did not, some that there's a logo I've used this on here before, but Chris Gasper of the Boston Globe here in Boston has a line that I love that, winning is the ultimate deodorizer. Well, apparently
Right.
it wasn't for
Not
AJ
for
Brown.
him.
He's still not happy. So they got
If that's not going to do it, I
on.
don't know what is. He's going to get some serious Febreze. Yeah, it's kind of funny when you look at the Chiefs, just not to flip it back over, but we're talking about those kind of older veteran receivers, but they had like DeAndre Hopkins, Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster. It sounds like the awesome Madden lineup from like 5 years ago. You know what I mean? It's like, this is like the dominant pro team from then. It's just obviously they've lost. So they got to be a little bit careful about who they end up filling their shoes if they do flip AJ Brown out. But I agree. It would be really interesting. They got to keep that defense going. That definitely what won the game for them right there. All right, let's go ahead and turn our topic now to the next topic today, and that's actually the NFL Combine, which actually kicks off on February 24th. It's only 10 days away from here, and it's going to wrap up on March 3rd in Indianapolis. The NFL has invited 329 prospects to work out, yet to see who will be attending. We assume all the big folks will be attending. Who knows who's going to be testing and running all the the things there. I just don't know. Some of them will probably show up. We're not sure what, for instance, Cam Ward will be doing and what Shedeur Sanders will be doing. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about the quarterback, because this year was last year was kind of the year of the quarterback. We had Caleb Williams, we had Jaden Daniels, you had Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, and Michael Penix. There's some big names in terms of quarterbacks come off really, really, really early in the draft, and many of them being successful, particularly Jaden Daniels just being out of this world successful with the Commanders. Even Bo Nix, and I don't think he is this good, but I think he is in the right system to be good. And that's what all these teams are going to be looking for. So clearly, some of the top quarterbacks that everybody are going to be talking about are Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. And then we do have two more I want to talk about in a minute, but let's talk about those guys first. Cam Ward, obviously star quarterback here, Heisman Trophy contender, had an incredible season at Miami after transferring from Washington State. He completed over 67% of his passes, threw for 4,313 yards, 39 touchdowns, just 7 interceptions. Also had 204 yards in the ground with 4 rushing touchdowns as well. I mean, he is obviously potentially in line to be the number 1 quarterback and the number 1 overall pick in next year's draft. His 4,123 passing yards broke Bernie Kosar's single season passing record, and he also broke Steve Walsh's touchdown mark. I mean, the only question mark, of course, is why did he excuse himself from the middle of the Pop-Tarts Bowl at halftime? But hey, listen, it was a bowl that didn't matter, and he had bigger things that he had to worry about, and they ended up losing that game, so there's some question marks there. But what do you think here? What are you looking for in Cam Ward when you get to the NFL Combine, and what do you think his prospects are for the draft coming up?
Yeah, so I mean, I was trying to find an example of one while you were talking that illustrates what kind of year I think we're having. 2014. Here are the top 4 quarterbacks drafted in order. And this goes into the early second round. Blake Bortles, Johnny Manziel, Teddy Bridgewater, Derek Carr. That is the quarterback draft we're talking about here.
Wow.
It's not a good draft.
Wow.
And I think specifically when it comes to Cam Ward, I see a lot of Dwayne Haskins in his game. and I watched him closely, writing for Fansided, Kane's website this season. So I watched him a lot. Now, he didn't have a ton around him, so he kind of made that team go. It's not, Restrepo's a decent receiver, but probably like a late second round, early third round kind of guy, possession
Yep.
guy. So it's not to take away what he did, but I just look at Cam Ward from watching him close. And to me, Cam Ward is the ultimate college quarterback. Like,
Wow.
I don't think it's transferable skills. Now, can throw bombs. He's got a huge arm.
He does.
He's a good athlete. His accuracy isn't like Josh Allen level bad, from a college standpoint. Like, and I don't just mean like, the straight percentage number, but like actually watching him on a throw by throw basis, like he's usually pretty on target. It's just, they play in the ACC, so they didn't play a ton of great talent. Like, I don't see a lot of those analytical, diagnosing, dissecting defenses. It was a lot of just a guy getting open and him hitting the guy. And when the play wasn't there, he just kind of held on to it and waited for, backyard football moments, and then would uncork one and make a big play. I don't see a lot of good NFL ready skill set in Cam Ward. So I think, I think he is the best in this class. But that, again, like the class I just talked about, being the best of that class gets you to be Derek Carr, Mr. 500.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, this is interesting because, I've been kind of looking at what the scouts are saying about Cam Ward, and I did watch him a fair amount only because because of Miami was pretty competitive throughout the season. So I wanted to keep an eye on that top 25 throughout the season. But, he apparently the scouts are saying, and I can kind of see this, his accuracy is top notch going into intermediate and deep intermediate routes, seam routes, deep crossers, those types of things. He's absolutely fantastic at. But if you're talking about a real deep ball, going, 35, 40 plus yards down the field, he's a little bit inaccurate because his mechanics kind of breaks down. He doesn't set his feet well. There's a lot of discussion about how he doesn't actually throw a great deep ball. He has a big arm, but he doesn't throw a great accuracy out there. I mean, I don't know how you figure that out in the combine, though. That's the only problem, is that clearly no one's in your face. You're not dealing with any defense. Everybody looks good in the combine, right? I mean, everybody can take a deep bomb while they're when they're running a bootleg, and somebody's going to catch it, and it's going to make the rounds on X at some point, or Instagram or whatever. So what are you looking for? Is there anything that we can look for in the combine to see if Cam Ward can be that guy or not? I mean, is it just going to be, we're going to have to wait until he gets into the field?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to wait to see. So that's, there's multiple problems this time of year. One being that it's a quarterback starved league. So
right.
His hype is going to go up between now and the draft day, because that's what happens with quarterbacks. People will talk themselves into, this guy's actually better than his tape shows, and that whole thing will happen, right? So from the public facing part of the combine, no. It's not just pulling himself out of the game. You talked about his bad footwork. And again, this was celebrated a little bit on Twitter during the season last year about how nonchalant he is. So I don't know if you've seen these clips, but he will just literally, he won't even be bouncing on the balls of his feet. He'll sit in the pocket and just flat-footed stand there with his arms dropped like this, just kind of surveying, looking around like, this is so easy for me.
Right, because he had big arm strength. So he's not dealing with, and he's not working on the fundamentals. He just kind of rely on his big arm. And I think that
not facing elite pass rush, because again, that's what we saw Mahomes do. You're going to do that shit against the Philadelphia Eagles, dude. You're going to get killed. And so it's bad habits, but it's also just like, it just doesn't feel like mentally he takes it as serious as he should.
Right.
Again, similar to tying that into bagging out of the, either play the bowl game or don't. Like, to go out there and to have your own agenda and own plan to pull yourself. And I don't care if you don't want to play the bowl game, but like, and he did the whole interview leading up to a Shador about how they were both talking about, like, I'm going to go out there. It's my last chance to ball out. And then he just stops. And like, so I don't know, character issues it's probably too strong, but I have some question marks on just how dialed in he is going to be as a professional. So I don't think he can do anything to alleviate the physical stuff. I think he's going to, similar to Drake May in New England, he'll be a bit of a reclamation project where he's going to need some good coaching and an offensive staff, and they're going to have to rebuild his footwork from ground level. Like, I think that's all stuff that's going to have to happen post-draft.
Right. I pretty much agree with that. I don't think there's going to be a lot you can do in terms of seeing anything at the NFL Combine that will make you feel any better about him.
Yeah, and so we won't see anything that's going to make us feel better. But teams, I mean, if he comes in and has a good interview and can
Yeah,
show some of that
definitely.
fix some of that stuff. So from a team perspective, I think things can be gleaned and learned about. But that's all private stuff. Like we don't get privy to all those crazy questions they ask in the interview. So it's
Right,
nothing we're
right.
going to see. But
Unless he pulls a
yeah,
DK and takes his shirt off in the middle of his interview, I mean, maybe he can do that, and that'll make the rounds for sure. So, and I'll say this about him pulling himself out of the game. Afterwards, when they interviewed the coaching staff, they all kind of said, "Oh yeah, we knew that," but he said he was going to start because other people would also bow out if he bowed out, and he wanted to convince him to start. But then he didn't tell us when they was going to stop. So I said, well, that doesn't sound great. I mean, what kind of game plan is that? Hey, coach, I'm going to take a snap because I don't want anybody else to bail out. But hey, I'll just stop whenever I want to. I mean, how do you plan around that? So I don't know. I feel like that's doesn't make it any better that he let everybody knew that he wasn't going to play a full game if he wasn't going to tell them exactly what he was going to do. But that being said, we'll see what happens out of Cam Ward. I mean, I agree. He's probably the best quarterback out of this class. But we should turn to Shedeur Sanders because he's the next guy up right now. He rewrote the record books in Jackson State and at Colorado. We all know that his dad is Deion Sanders, and he played for him. He had an exceptional completion rate last year, 74.2%. That led all FBS quarterbacks. His statistics for that for over the entirety of his career is pretty mind-blowing in terms of numbers. 13,000 passing yards, 121 touchdowns, and just 23 interceptions. In his last season of Colorado, 3,230 passing yards, 69.3% completion percentage. And he was pretty good for the most part. However, there were certainly some issues with taking sacks, spending so much time in the pocket. His decision-making was a little bit questionable. And he takes a lot of negative plays. I mean, he took 52 sacks, and you can blame the offensive line as much as you want, but there's certainly some aspect of that falls on Sanders trying to make a play way too long. So with that said, Ryan, what do you think here about Shedeur Sanders and the NFL Combine? What do you think? What are you looking for? Is there anything we can see at the NFL Combine that will improve his stock? And what do you think his draft prospects are?
Yeah. So, and I also turned off my cam because I'm having tons of bandwidth issues right now. But
This picture of you, which is a big white dot, is way cooler than the real you, anyways.
way more handsome. But no, I think Shedeur again. I think again comparing him to that 2014 draft, Shedeur to me as a prospect is Johnny Manziel.
Okay. Wow.
He's not. He was athletic for a college quarterback, but he's not an elite athlete. Like in terms of like
Right.
athleticism, like he's
Mm-hmm.
not. He doesn't have a good arm. Like it's fine. It's an adequate arm. He's but he's I think he's better than Mac Jones. Let's say that, but he's not an elite arm.
Right.
And then to your point, his ability to read defenses, the way he holds onto the ball forever. I know he didn't have a good offensive line in Colorado, so you'd have
Right.
thought he'd have been more dialed in to get the ball out quickly.
Right.
But he
Right.
didn't. And so he kind of just, there's so many times in plays where he just spins to nowhere. And I thought a massive regression from his first year at Colorado to second,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of just, I don't have the stats in front of me, so I don't have the stats buried out. But like watching Colorado as invested as I did, because I am one of those fair weather Deion
Deion
Colorado
Sanders fans.
but but watching him year one to year two, they got better, and I feel like he got worse. I feel like if they had Shedeur from 2023, then in 2024 they might have had a chance to sneak into the playoffs. But he wasn't great. Again, another guy that I don't really care for his personality.
Yeah.
I think there were multiple times this year he threw his offensive line under the bus. I forget which game it is now, but they had asked him, post game about how he got outdueled by somebody. I forget what game it was, and his first question back was, how many times did he get hit compared to me? Which I
Right.
mean, he didn't say my offensive line sucks, but he might as well have.
He might as well have.
There were a couple mic'd up altercations that you're able to go find on Twitter between him and Travis Hunter. And
Right.
I'm okay with tough love. I'm okay with tough coaching, but the way those clips come across to me is very much like you're the problem. And so when you piece those two different parts together,
Yeah. A little bit of Aaron Rodgers on him.
yeah, it feels like, when things are good, I'm the guy, and when things are bad, like, don't look at me.
Right.
which I just don't have. I mean, again, the quarterback has got to be the most accountable and selfless player on the team, and I don't see that from Shador. So, him though, I have way more questions about his physical skill set than I do Cam. So I do think that Shador can have a good. I don't think he will, but he could come to the combine and all of a sudden be able to uncork a ball 65 yards or, hit a deep out route on a dime, and put it right in the perfect location. Like he could come and do those. I have way more questions about him as an actual skilled quarterback. So he can do, more to help his case there. Again, would I put
Yeah.
money on it? Absolutely not. But I think there's room for him to show some of that physical skill set that I have a lot of questions about.
Yeah, if they put him in a situation where they give him like a first and second read and it's just like, air raid type offense, just go, 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 he could be. I mean, his short and intermediate game, short and intermediate accuracy is pretty much out of this world. So I think, and his completion rate is overall just out of this world. It's just a question of whether he can make good decisions in the pocket when he's facing pro level NFL defenses like the Eagles, right? I mean, the thing is that he's facing mid-tier talent, and he was getting sacked like nobody's business. And I think he just felt like he could do more than he could. And that's a major problem. Like you can blame your offensive line, just like Patrick Mahomes can blame his offensive line, but those 6 sacks are on him to a certain extent, right? I mean, being able to diagnose that, see that defense coming in, you're going to I'll have to do something about that. And I think there may be some problems there for Shador Sanders, but interesting to see what will happen. I guess there's not much we can see at the NFL Combine to make us feel any better about it, but we'll see how that kind of comes out. We got 2 more guys I want to talk about here, Ryan, and these guys are much further down the list. So those guys are pretty much consensus 1 and 2s. Some of them flip it, but Cam Ward, Shador Sanders, probably the top 2, maybe even the top overall 2 picks in the draft coming up. But let's talk a little bit about Riley Leonard, our guy from Notre Dame. Obviously, he's had a relatively decent career, but he's not a super standout. He has some impressive statistics from Duke. He had a passer rating of 137.35, very high, and he had 872 rushing yards for 15 touchdowns there at Duke, and he had the best TD to INT record in Duke's history of 3-1. At Notre Dame, he had a passer rating of 139.6. So his passer rating actually went up in his last year at Notre Dame this past season. He had 2,861 passing yards, a 66.7% completion percentage, which is funny because I watched all his games and could have fooled me, but I guess he does complete a lot of high percentage passes as well. 21 touchdowns to 8 INTs, but most impressively, 906 rushing yards at a clip of 4.9 yards per rush and 17 rushing touchdowns. He's 6'4", 209, and he has kind of surprising speed. I don't want to call it janky, but it's almost like he's a big dude, but somehow he's able to get there and start moving, and he can really threaten to run the ball. Now, I don't know if that continues in the NFL, but what are you looking for Riley Leonard at the NFL Combine? A guy who is probably not at the top of the list of most draft pundits in the Combine. What would you like to see from him to make you feel better about him moving forward? And what do you think his draft prospects are?
Yeah, so I think there's really one route for Riley Leonard to be successful in the NFL. And that's to follow in Tommy Rees's footsteps and become an offensive coordinator. Because I think this guy sucks.
Oh, man.
And let me say, the heart he showed in the Georgia game, particularly the 4th down conversion, or was a late 3rd down or 4th down? I can't remember.
Where he jumped over there and got knocked in the air.
And flipped and the whole thing, like tons of heart.
Right.
He sucks. He can't throw the freaking football. Like most of his again, if I was looking at advanced analytics site and looked at like true completion percentage versus what his actual completion percentage was, like this is a guy who just hit wide open targets. And if it wasn't wide open, he wasn't hitting it. He does not read a defense well at all. Like you talked about Shador needing to be unlimited, reads. This guy, it better be the primary read and it better be right every time because it's not happening otherwise. I think he's got a noodle arm. I don't think he's very talented. I don't even the running because like what you just said, I heard announcers say it all year and all through the playoffs. He's got surprising speed. I don't see surprising speed. I don't know how he does what he does. I'm not going to argue with the stats of how he moved the ball with his feet, but it doesn't ever look good. It doesn't look athletic. It doesn't this is a poor man's version of Daniel Jones, and that's not a good place to be.
Wow, poor man's version of Daniel Jones. I was gonna say almost like I was gonna go down to Taysom Hill. I thought he might be a gadget player, in the NFL.
That's Taysom Hill is at least yoked, which I don't really see from.
Yeah, I guess Riley Leonard's kind of almost like I said. He's almost like he's Shaggy running around out there, but.
So there's really nothing. I mean, it's a long way of saying and I'm not just doing this to be facetious, but the way he impresses me at the combine is to show up as a different person, and I don't mean a better version of himself. I mean like completely new. Again, like Shador, he can go out there and maybe show some things that he's improved on in the last 2 months or whatever it is.
Right.
And I expect him to get a shot in the NFL, but it's another one. It's also an interesting time right now because, we've said this in years past, because I was just thinking about this with Shador, the Chiefs years ago, right? The Chiefs were just a quarterback away from competing. Can you name the NFL team right now? Because I don't think there is one. I don't think there's one single team that I look at and go, that's a loaded roster that just needs a quarterback. The Dolphins 3 years ago, but now Tyreek's older and wants out. All the other pieces have kind of fallen behind. That defense isn't really developed the way you thought. So the Dolphins aren't that right now. So I don't even think there's a good fit for any of these guys. I don't think there's a plug and play scenario where, and part of that is because there were so many quarterbacks taken last year, right? That most of those well-developed teams like the Falcons and stuff, they have a guy. And so I don't think there's a great fit. So I'm not expecting much out of Riley Leonard at the combine.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see his progressions, some of his passing. I think some of the passing would be kind of interesting to see. I mean, my problem with him is I think he is mediocre when it comes to short routes, even though that was the majority of what they had him do. His deep passes are actually relatively well placed. I think he has good touch and ball placement, but I think that most of what he does in the short and intermediate is pretty rough. And when he bootlegs and if he's improvising or getting out of the pocket, things just fall apart so fast. So he's got to have an astounding offensive line to be really successful. So we'll see what happens. But I'm going to be keeping my eyes on how that works out. Let's get to the last guy I want to talk about today. Is Jackson Dart. Now, in 2023, Dart actually led Ole Miss to their first ever 11-win season and a Peach Bowl victory over Penn State. He completed 233 of 358 passes. That's 65.1% for 3,364 yards and 23 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions. Added 389 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns. He did fantastic. Had a little bit of a downturn in 2024. After 2023, we all kind of thought he was destined to be one of the top round picks, and then he kind of dipped a little bit, so kind of fell a little bit out of the running. But he has a lot less competition this year in terms of other quarterbacks in the draft. Lots of plus and minuses here coming with Jackson Dart. What do you think about Jackson Dart? Is there anything that you're looking at for him at the NFL Combine? And what do you think his draft prospects look like?
Yeah, so I don't think well, first I'll say one thing I immediately don't like about him, and this is kind of like an antiquated thing, but I like tall quarterbacks. So 6'2" already gets my antenna up of just being concerned about who he can be. Now that said, compared to these other guys, he played a much more competitive college schedule. And so I think there's some stuff that he can do. So I'd like to see how accurate he can throw the ball at the combine, because I think that's going to be important for him. And because he does have he has pretty decent accuracy downfield. Now, again, the thing that I always hate about the combine is, the thing that we're missing, and I know that everyone knows this, but you're lacking being able to see a guy who's able to fit a ball in a tight window when bullets are flying, and that's so much of what the NFL is. And so he's not gonna be able to show me that, but I am looking for him to again, those outside routes, particularly, a deep out route to the right where he's, on the left hash, and, can he deliver that ball to a guy in stride on his hands, in stride kind of deal. Like that's what, and
Totally
as
agree.
much as possible, us to evaluate if he can fit it into a tight window or not. So, but
I absolutely agree, though, that the anticipation is the problem, right? We haven't seen him have to anticipate anything because he's kind of a one-read guy. And seeing some of that on display in some passing drills at the combine would make me feel a little bit better. But I absolutely believe, I mean, everything you said there, I think is spot on. The fact of the matter is that we just don't know how he's going to perform when there's a real defense out there. He obviously had a higher level of competition, but when it was a particularly challenging defense, he fell apart. So that's one of those things I think that we won't know until he gets on the field. And that's something that is going to be a little bit of a leap of faith, I think, for anybody who's going to be looking at him at the combine, because you can only do so much in terms of gleaning how well he will anticipate receivers in those passing drills. We know he can hit receivers when he knows where they're going to be. We know he can do that, right? At 65.1% completion percentage, and he was a heavily schemed offense at Ole Miss. So it's really clear he knows how to hit that one guy. But what happens if he can't go to that one guy? We don't know. That's the big question mark for me, and I don't know how you figure that out from the NFL Combine.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The only other thing I'm looking for is he is another guy with footwork concerns and mechanic
Yes,
concerns.
absolutely. Yep.
So I think he's going to do himself a lot of favors with a really clean performance from a mechanic standpoint.
Right.
So yeah, I think.
I will say this though, like as compared to Riley Leonard, when Jackson Dart gets out of the when he starts getting out of the pocket, starts creating, or if they set up like a planned bootleg, he's actually pretty good throwing the ball on the run. Now, that's again heavily schemed offense, so clearly he was built for a one read passing type of play, but he can do that, right? I mean, he has the ability to do that. So I do think there's some raw skills there, but I just don't know how that's going to translate to the NFL. The anticipation is such an important part of being a good quarterback in the NFL, and also the being able to diagnose defenses and going to more than one option. I just don't think he can do. I mean, we don't have any evidence that I shouldn't say. I don't know if he can do it. We don't have any evidence that he can go through a multiple read type offense, and that's going to be a problem that will absolutely cap where he can be. He might be like, Bo Nix successful if he gets into the right system, but I don't think he's a guy that, I mean, at least from what we know now, that you can build a franchise around. I'm not going to be as down on any of these guys as you were on Riley Leonard, but it gets a little bit. It's more of a dart. I mean, no pun intended, but Jackson Dart is more of a dart throw in the draft this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a simple question for me. Any of these four guys, including the top two guys, would you take any of them ahead of the top 5 quarterbacks drafted in last year's draft?
No, I don't think so. I mean, that's the problem is I have not seen enough of Michael Penix. I haven't seen anything really of JJ McCarthy. So very hard to say. But if you were just put name value and you said they all were in the same draft, probably not.
Yeah, I don't think Cam. I know Cam Ward had a great year this year, but I don't think him at his best touches the season that we saw from Michael Penix or the season that we saw from JJ. And JJ had a better team around him, but Michael Penix, I mean, just again going on the college resume, dragged a Washington team to the Final Four.
Right.
Cam Ward collapsed down the stretch and could not bring the Miami, and I know Ward had Penix had better receivers, but Ward was not able in a weaker conference, in a weaker schedule, could not get Miami to the Final 8. Or what was it, 12? Why am I drawing a blank? Yes, 12.
Yeah, 12. Final 12.
So
they were like 13. They just missed it.
3x'd it, and he still couldn't bring his team. And I'm sorry, as a quarterback, wins and losses are team stats. And I will argue this till I'm dead, because I hate when people say, the pundits will say, wins and losses is a team stat. And I agree on every single position in sports except for starting pitchers and except for quarterbacks. Those two you can evaluate on wins and losses. So I do hold that against Cam Ward, that he couldn't get his team to the postseason. So again, when I think he's the best prospect in this, and I think either Penix or JJ or Bo or the three that I think are the worst, or I said five, the three of the six, because I'd forgotten about JJ. I think you take all six of those guys that were drafted last year ahead of any of the guys in this class.
Although funny enough though, if this was last year, and Jackson Dart had gotten into the draft, I might have gotten Dart before I took Penix, and I might have taken Dart before I took Bo Nix. I probably would have been wrong just based on what happened, but like he had a really good 2023. It's just his performance in 2024 raised a lot of question marks about his ability to play in a pro style offense, and I think that we didn't see that because he was so successful in 2023, but
that's
yeah,
fair. I'm bending parts of that argument to fit my narrative now, because if anyone wants to go check the tape on what I said about Bo Nix before, actually not even before, but in the midst of the Broncos season this year, I've said
that's right.
He sucks. So
that's right.
But that's
I
how
said that
down I am
too.
on this class, because so maybe again, if Cam Ward hadn't looked the way he did in those final 3 games of the year, I probably feel completely different. But I just have such a I mean, my Saturdays were watching the Canes games because I was writing about it, and I did a lot of defending Cam early. But what happened down the stretch was not solely his fault, but it certainly was on his shoulders too. So that just holds a lot of stock with me.
Totally agree with that. And that, folks, brings us to the end of the show. Let's hit the air horn there. We'll talk about some other parts of the combine as we get closer to it, because, of course, there are some wide receivers, some running backs. It's interesting because on the offensive side, nobody really kind of jumps out as being super, super exciting. On the defensive side, there are a lot of potential prospects here to keep an eye on, and there's some good offensive linemen as well. We'll try to touch on all that before the NFL Combine starts in about 10 days. But for now, Ryan, why don't you give us your social media so people can follow you?
Yeah, so you can follow me at Ryan Whitfield NE, and yeah, I mean this upcoming draft, we'll talk about it more, but it is a running back rich draft, and it is a interior offensive line and interior defensive line draft. Those are the spots that are somewhat deep. And for somebody who hates that part of the game but doesn't think it's really relevant in the NFL, this is going to be a tough year for me. But before we sign off though, with the last couple minutes here, I do got to ask you, because it became quite controversial this week. But what did you think of Kendrick Lamar's halftime performance?
See, I liked it. I know people came at me when I said that. I actually thought it was pretty solid. Now the thing was that I was a little bit. I mean, I thought I wasn't totally on board of all the songs he picked to play. And I was a big fan of All Right, so I was kind of hoping that was going to come in. But that being said, I didn't think it was that bad. But I heard a lot of people come at it. So what are your thoughts on the Kendrick Lamar halftime show?
Yeah, I don't think it was a bad performance. I thought it was actually really, really entertaining. But I'm a Kendrick Lamar fan, So when we talked last week about what song we thought he opened with, I threw out the verse from Effin' Problems, 2 Chainz, or the A$AP Rocky song.
A$AP Rocky, yeah.
But the reason why I threw that out is because that is a pop song, right? That's a pop rap song, and I think that's the problem with Kendrick as the choice, and it is that. I'm sorry, you need a guy who's like a top 10 hits kind of guy. And that's just not Kendrick. He's more artsy than that. He's more soulful than that. One of my all-time favorite songs, I know it's a single, so this isn't like really cool undercut. But you mentioned the one you like. I mean, Swimming Pools, when that first dropped, that was one of my favorite songs. That's not a halftime show song, though. It just isn't. So he was the wrong performer for that setting, I think. And as much as he killed Drake, and it was, for all of us that have followed that drama, that was a fun moment. But Drake's a better halftime performance choice. He is.
Yeah.
The better catalog. They say play the hits, and he just doesn't have hits like that. So I'm throwing, this is not an original idea. A guy on a local station here said it, and I totally agree. Next year's performer should be somebody like Sabrina Carpenter. You need somebody who just charted 3 straight #1 hits in a row this summer to that's who it should be. Because those are the people because that's the thing. It's most of this is turned into what all our conversations do these days, into political-esque conversations, and so this has turned into old men didn't like this or whatever, and but that's not the answer either, right? Because when they got scared off because of Janet Jackson years ago, we got a run of the Who and all these 60s, 70s bands. We don't need to do that. You just need pop stars. It's a pop star. I don't like Katy Perry's catalog, but her 2014 performance was memorable. The stupid
and Left Shark. Left Shark. He made that happen.
Yeah. And Lady Gaga in 2016, I think it was like an iconic performance. Like you need somebody.
You need something that everybody's you're gonna have to have some wider appeal in terms of the halftime show, because you have to understand that. And that's why I was thinking that he would play his hits. But and you're right. I really didn't think of it this way. His hits aren't like, Taylor Swift hits, right? I mean,
Right.
so it's a totally different, it's a different vibe, but it's also a different audience. And I think that could be a little bit tough.
And if you want a hip hop feel, that's fine. Like again, go somebody with more mass appeal like Doja or Ice Spice, right? Like somebody who when you
both
put
of
on
which
the songs,
great performers, actually. Yeah.
I love Kendrick, so I love the performance. I just don't think that's just like I love Wale, but Wale is not, his rap catalog is not exactly I love Kid Cudi, but Kid Cudi's got 2 songs that most people would recognize, and the rest is not gonna resonate. So
no, fair enough. That's fair.
But I enjoyed it. I was the only person in my entire the entire party I was at that was enjoying. Well, me and my 13-year-old son loved it too. But outside of that, we were around a bunch of people like dived in. I just not getting it. And my son Con and I were dying when he did the whole "Say Drake" and looked in the camera. So again, I loved it. But
I loved it too. But you're right. That is a very, very good point in terms of the Super Bowl being a mass appeal type of event. You got to get a mass appeal type halftime show. But I will secretly say I still enjoyed it. So that probably more so than most of the games. So, so there you go.
That's as good as Miles in. He was bouncing around from set piece to set piece. He was. He did not mail in that performance.
Definitely not.
He worked.
That was very entertaining. Lots of energy. I loved every part of that.
Yeah.
All right, Kendrick Lamar, if you are listening to our podcast, hats off to you, my friend. Good job.
I wouldn't have chosen you, given now what we know. Now, I was worried about it, and then I saw it play out, and I was like, yeah, that's what I was kind of worried about with him. But
yeah,
Cocoon and I liked it, so there you go.
Yes,
now he's all happy now. He got paid, and you and I liked it, which is all he really.
That's all he wanted, and that's what he said when he got up there. He's like, I hope Ryan and Cocoon like this, because that's who I'm playing for. And I'm like, thank you.
Mission accomplished, buddy.
All right, you can find me at. Well, thank you for listening and wasting time with us. And until next time, enjoy your NFL